Click live. All right.
Hey, everybody. Welcome in tonight for the Ball and Breakfast podcast. We are going to be talking about the NBA Finals coming up on Thursday. So, if you guys were up last night watching the game for the Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7, you were probably holding on to your seat for much of the first half. But kind of rolling into that second half, it just started to get, the margin started to get wider and wider as it, closed down to the fourth quarter. But impressive run by the Miami Heat. You got to give your credit, I guess, to the Boston Celtics for pushing this actually to 7 because it looked like they were pretty much dead in the water at a certain point. But the Heat were able to kind of come out and stay on top and push through in a closeout game when all the pressure was on the line. So again, it just seemed like the Heat were the more prepared basketball team. They were the better basketball team. And now they face the Denver Nuggets, the number one seed over in the Western Conference, all year. Kind of had a nice run throughout the playoffs. Very, um, you know, quiet, I would say, for a team that's representing the West and kind of doing what they did. But Wayne, what was your thoughts about last night's game? Let's just touch on that first between the Heat and the Celtics, and kind of what you took away from both teams. Moving on here, into the summer.
Yeah. I mean, Caleb gonna make a bunch of money. I feel like because of the series he had. Right. Keep in mind like this Heat team is shorthanded, right? Not just Tyler Hero, but also Victor Oladipo too. So that definitely is what I guess has pushed Caleb Martin to get more playing time, and he really has stepped up. I feel like both on obviously he's shooting lights out, but then also on the defensive side has that length maybe advantage and more of a defensive presence than say Tyler Hero in that sense. But obviously, I'm sure that the Heat will be and happy to have Tyler Hero back. But I mean, it's a number of things. Obviously, it's like the Heat really in this game 7. It could have been something right where they just got completely obliterated from this Celtics team. That later a little bit, but I feel like the Heat. I think they had the right mindset going into this game, and they very much so could have let the Celtics kind of come in there, and they maybe did a little bit, but any good team they're going to make a run in basketball, and that definitely is what the Celtics did. I think they were up by like around 20, and then they kind of closed in under 10, but then afterwards the Heat were like, all right, the pedal to the metal a little bit. So, but great that he, I guess, won kind of like the MVP of the series and everything. But Martin, man, that guy was a beast. Definitely, you know, was an asset on the offensive liability on the defensive side, which Tyler Hero can be on at times. But this team, I don't know. I feel really good about. I guess he kind of to here, and then not too much to say about the Denver Nuggets. You really touched based on that. That was your team to pick and everything, and they've been the all season, right? With the best record in the West. Had some doubts. It's like, oh, are they going to stay healthy? Like they really haven't had that steady being of just being healthy. Bubble season, but they were just young, and obviously they've upgraded right with adding Gordon, and and now kind of a couple years into this whole system with Malone and everything. Like it really goes to show like helps how much kind of building through the draft helps, and then adding pieces CP and Brown too, right, which is great. I think they had adding those two in there, so kind of kudos to them. But yeah, Heat that series definitely am impressed with them. Maybe they have gone to Game 7, but hey, they're going to the finals, and I think that's all that matters here.
Yeah, I think I might have said something about this maybe a round ago or so, but it's like for the Heat and all the guys that they have on that team, it's like we are now watching them create names for themselves. We are now at that period where, Caleb Martin becomes a a role player or maybe a third wheel, a fourth wheel for a championship team in the future here. Maybe we're looking at Max Strus that'll always be in rotations. We're looking at Gabe Vincent, other guys. It's just like because certain guys went down, others stepped up and started filling, their shoes and started playing, the type of basketball maybe they were always capable of, and others just overlooked them throughout their entire careers. I mean, somebody made the point that, Duncan Robinson was, D3 to kick off his college career, transferred over to Michigan, and Michigan was reluctant to give him the shot, and he, broke through that ceiling. Max Strus started out at D2 at Lewis University, transferred over to DePaul University, and went undrafted. Started off at the Bulls and got kicked around, and found his way onto the Miami Heat. So it's just like you go up and down this roster. Outside of Adebayo and Butler and maybe Kyle Lowry, some of the more you know uh, illustrious names out of that franchise, and it's just like, man, just look at the grit, the grime, like all these guys that you can kind of cobble together to create a team. And in a lot of ways, it's a little bit reminiscent of the Boston Celtics from last year. It's like, we went in, we had Robert Williams, we had Grant Williams, we had, you know, uh, Derek White, I guess, stepping out a little bit. But it was interesting. I mean, for the Heat to go up 3-0, I think that kind of just shocked the world. I think, reality really hadn't really sunk in, too strongly yet. But one thought that I heard today on sports radio is just this idea of, the Celtics really stepped up when there was no pressure on the line. There was no pressure against them. At a 3-0 game, nobody's looking at them. At 3-1, nobody thinks they're going to win. 3-2, okay, it's getting a little bit closer, but still, like, but the second it got to 3-3 and the pressure went back to the Celtics to defend home court, they folded. And I feel like there's something within, a championship team, a championship roster that wouldn't allow those things to kind of happen, wouldn't allow these things to slip through their fingers. And it happened last year. I mean, we were in the finals last year, and Boston has, seemingly all the talent in the world on that roster. But there's something about, the moment that might catch them and might catch them in a way that they're just not able to, push through. And, this isn't for me the signal to like, let's blow up this Boston Celtics team. And like, this was not a good fit for any of these guys. And I think it like, because they lose in the semifinals of the whole thing, they're, 4 of the 30, plus teams left in the game. It's like, I think people are quick to like say, well, this roster doesn't work and like, we need to blow it up. I don't think it's that as much. I just think it's like, man, they just got outwilled, they got outlasted, they got outplayed, and like you just got to tip your cap to Miami and say, Butler and Adebayo, they held it together in that last, game, and all these other guys just stepped up night in, night out. I mean, it was the Caleb Martins and Gabe Vincent and others that like really carried it here and there, and it's like that's the true sign of a basketball team. I mean, I think this for basketball purists, this is like returning to the glory days of basketball when it was like you actually built real, fucking teams. And it's like, I'm so thankful for it. I mean, this is the year where we get, a Denver squad that's like basically all homegrown. I mean, they did add Aaron Gordon and KCP and some others, but it's like, that is like a uniquely, developed organization, a developed team that really like has paid their dues. They went through the bubble, got close. I mean, they played their butts off there. They took some hits with injuries and stuff, but like they persevered and they're in it. And for Miami, it's like very similar. Like they went to the finals a couple of years ago, came up short. I think they've always been a little light on talent, but like just big on heart. And it's like now that's going to carry them into the finals. And like this is what we want to watch. We don't want to watch like a bunch of these cobbled together superstar diva rosters that nobody really gives a shit about. It's like this is so nice. This is such a fresh breath of air for everybody who loves basketball. So I'm just looking forward to seeing them lace it up on Thursday, and it'll just be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that sentiment of like these are two teams that really kind of built, well, the Celtics, they definitely built through the draft, but then I think the Heat and that culture, right? Too much about like other cultures, but there is like an identity of Heat culture. Like they're grinders, and that's this whole undrafted thing, right? Everybody has a chip on their back, and you also look at the best player of the team, right? Jimmy Butler. Like I think he was in JUCO before too, before going to Marquette, and then like there aren't too many like first round that was out there, and all the first round talent that Miami has, they were kind of like mid-level first rounders, I think. It was picked out of the top 10, or maybe was a top 10, but was kind of picked out of the top 10. Uh, I think he was a 20 some odd pick right out of Villanova. So all of these players have been doubted in their career, and they're like, you know what, you doubted us, but we're gonna use that fuel to like fire up ourselves and I guess chip on their shoulder throughout. So I'm just really impressed by that. And yeah, Denver, they're all have all come through the draft. Obviously Jokic, then even Murray too. I think I was looking at the who was picked ahead of Murray, right? Like I think like Chris Dunn was picked ahead of him, and several other players. Like, was that the best choice? Probably not, right? But hey, Murray has been like one of the best overall, I think, in this playoffs for sure. And then Junior, like I think a lot. He definitely has had his history of injuries and such, but has had a pretty fairly healthy season this season. And there were a lot of teams kind of overlooked him because of that his back injury history. Look at him now. Like, it has taken obviously a couple of years to kind of rejuvenate his body and such, but has been playing really well. And at 6'10", he previously was kind of a liability on the defensive end, but he's a little bit more, and has definitely not been a liability at 6'10", but then also has the ability to shoot. So I think the constructed squad overall, obviously with the draft, but then adding in those key free agents, I think definitely has helped solidify that core, and be having that veteran presence certainly helps players that maybe not have had the chance. So I think all the players that we mentioned, Jeff Green too, right? Kind of coming off the bench there. I think he's a valued asset there too. So just a well constructed squad. Every player kind of plays their role, and having the 2-time MVP as well. I think definitely helps, and he's such a humble guy and such a great passer, obviously too, willing to share the ball, and has a lot of guts too. Just accepts a lot of content, and just really knows how to play basketball. Those two fadeaways, right? I think the 3-point line, just right. So I think full steam ahead. This is going to be a great series, but obviously, like, yeah, that Denver Nuggets team is such a well constructed team.
Yeah, I mean, and I've just again never seen a team kind of waltz their way into the finals with just like not a lot of fanfare, not a lot of noise. I mean, it's like the media hasn't even like acknowledged that they're actually going to be representing, the West in the finals. And yeah, I mean Porter, I always liked him. I mean, when he was coming out for the draft, I thought the Bulls might take him. They went with Wendell Carter Jr. instead, and we flipped him for Vooch. And I kind of look back on that, I was like, like we kind of need some 3-and-D, type depth here. We need those kind of pieces to like really get us to another level. Like, I don't think Porter's really reached the ceiling that a lot of people have had laid out for him. And, his story's not done being written either. I mean, if he wins a championship here, that'll be, a huge piece of his resume, and maybe, with some better health, he can take the next step. But no, this team, I mean, I love the starting five. They've obviously got, like you were saying, Brown and Green off the bench, been kind of supporting most of the minutes, a little bit of Christian Braun, but, Nikola, Jokic is just, man, I don't even know. Like, he's a unicorn. Like, I don't even know. Like, it's almost like we look at Giannis, we're like, he's the freak. This guy is kind of like the freak, but then he also is just like a pure basketball player. Like, he has touch, he has finesse, he can pass. He's obviously very tall and like can grab boards and, do it all for the most part. So, I mean, all the things you'd wish Giannis could do at an elite level, it feels like Jokic can. I mean, maybe obviously Jokic doesn't have the same like athleticism or agility as like a Giannis, but man, it's just like he will kind of reshape the way we maybe evaluate talent. I think going forward, I mean, the fact that these centers have really stepped up, the best of the best, the Embiids, others. I mean, they're changing the way that we view your top player, and I think we talked about that last time. But it's just it's fun to watch this Denver team. Obviously Miami's earned their way in here. How How are you feeling about this series? I mean, these two teams, matching up, and do you have a prediction off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny is that whenever I've doubted the series, I feel like so it's like but at the same time, I'm cheering for Jimmy Butler. Like I'd love to see him get that chip because this guy's worked. So obviously being a Bulls fan, right? Kind of coming working his way up. Like he barely played his first season, right? But then showed kind of worked his way into the rotation, worked his way into the lineup, and because Tom Thibodeau really doesn't play rookies, and just showed like, oh, this guy has heart battles, right? And that followed him. Tom Thibodeau, I'm sure he say in terms of like trying to get Jimmy Butler to the Minnesota Timberwolves. But I'm thinking Thibodeau probably had some say right in getting him there. They went to the playoffs there, but man, just the career trajectory, I guess, the story arc that Jimmy Butler has, like it's made out of movies, right? This, like kind of got kicked out of his house, right? Kind of like a Michael Orr-esque type of story there, and now is one of the best players, one of the most respected players too, I think, right? Like nobody doubts and how he really kind of gives it all. People would definitely get even LeBron in his talent level just because of all the flopping he does and kind of crying and whining here and there. But Jimmy Butler, everybody loves his attitude. It kind of brings that like '90s basketball attitude. I feel like, and that's definitely I think is something that's missed in today's game. So, Butler, like I'd like to see him win the championship, but then at the before when I doubt the Heat, that apparently. So I'll pick the Nuggets. I feel pretty good about that. I don't know what the biggest odds are, but you look at the talent that they have. You also look at the matchup as well, just of all that I think the Denver Nuggets bring with and with Aaron Gordon. Like I don't think there's anybody that matches up with those players on the Heat side, right? Caleb Martin, they're definitely gritty guys, and they definitely help against Tatum and Brown, Grant Williams, etc. from the Celtics. But I feel like and Aaron Gordon, like those guys are physical freaks of nature, and then too. So that's where I feel like there's somewhat of an advantage there, and obviously Jokic too. Like Murray can go off, and I don't know if there's necessarily going to be an answer toward. Be honest, I think on if they were to do pick and rolls and I get that Bam could definitely guard the point guard position, but I definitely try to pick favorable with Murray and whomever maybe that they want to target from there. So that's where I feel pretty strongly with the team they got. That being said, I have Denver Nuggets too. This is their first time being here, right? I think they went, I believe, right, that 1 year on the bubble, but then had their injuries, so it's really tough. It's really tough. But for me, if I were to bet, I'd pick the house, probably go with the Denver Nuggets. But man, deep down, it's like with all the undrafted players, Jimmy Butler, I'd love to see the Heat win.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like if the Heat were to win it, I wouldn't feel all that bad. I mean, it's not the team that I'm rooting for in general, but I do think, Butler has earned the right to be a world champion. I mean, at this point, to do it twice, to get, teams that I think were a little undermanned or a little underwhelming as far as like going into, the playoff tournaments that they went into. I mean, I think a lot of teams are overlooking both those squads, and it's like Jimmy was at the center of them all. And, I was thinking about this. Even if the Heat were to have lost last night, I was like, is Jimmy Butler a better player than Charles Barkley at this point? I mean, is Jimmy Butler on the same level as some of these legends who never did it, but like reached a lot of different accolades in their career? And I was like sitting back and I'm like, man, like even if Jimmy loses this one, I mean, he's got to be held in like a similar breath, at this point. I mean, just with what he's amassed over his career, the grit that he's obviously shown. he's almost like the clean version of Ron Artest. I mean, if Ron Artest really stayed, level and he was able to kind of keep the antics, off, the court and just like play basketball. I mean, those two are really reminiscent of one another. I mean, those are the kinds of guys. I mean, I loved Ron Artest like at his his best points because he was just such a gamer and he just played so hard. And I just see that in Jimmy Butler too. But I think with this, I've got the Nuggets in 5 in this one, and it's no slight to the Heat. I just don't think the Heat have played a team like the Nuggets just yet. I think the Nuggets have the same level of heart as the Heat. They just wrapped up their series in 4 games. I mean, it's like they didn't have the ability to show you the heart that I think they possess, and they just put away teams the way that you're supposed to. And I think the talent is there. They've obviously, gone through their ups and downs. I mean, they've gone through their adversity. To have the injuries they've had in years where people were projecting them to take a leap. The bubble was a big year for them to kind of like test the waters and see what they're really made of. And I think they definitely showed out in that season. So I think they're ready for this. I think that they are not going to be surprised by Miami. They've got a tremendous amount of rest, for their team. They're starting off at home. I mean, I think like the way that it could be mapped out for them, they're in the best position to win right now. And, the only thing I think about is, looking at their top 2 players and who they're going to be defended by. You got Jokic going up against Adebayo. I think if there was one guy who you'd probably want to stick on Jokic in the NBA, I don't think you could pick a better guy than Bam, in my opinion. I really don't. You can think of other guys, that's fine. I think that's a great person to match up with Jokic just in terms of defensive prowess, agility, lacking a little size, I guess, but, I think that's okay. And then, if you're Murray, I mean, do you stick Jimmy Butler on Murray? I mean, just do you put Jimmy on their best, guard? Like possibly. So I think the Heat are well placed, I think, on the defensive side to give it their best shot. I just don't know if their best shot is enough. And no, I just feel really good about the Nuggets this year.
Yeah, no, I think that all those points are great. And
No, I might pick like
I think
Denver
Denver,
in 6. So
run through there.
but
I definitely wonder, right? Because he definitely is an X factor. I would say it looks like he's going to be able to play like game 1. I believe. I think there was they had pictures of him, or video footage of him like working out and doing things. So we'll see if he's available game 1 there. But I just see him as an X factor just because we talk about right? With Murray. Murray's a pretty, big point guard. I think he's like 6'4". So, that's definitely is where I feel like half unit, right? Like that's where I don't feel like a Gabe Vincent or even Kyle Lowry, like that matchup with Jamaal Murray, that could definitely be a disadvantage there. Again, the size I feel like of the Denver Nuggets is such a big advantage. Obviously, are all skilled there too. So that's like maybe we if Tyler Murray does Tyler Curry, man, I'm botching up the names there. If
No worries.
if he's able to play, like it would be interesting. Obviously, who knows how well he's playing, if he's in basketball shape, but him being there could be an advantage just because maybe they play a little bit less Vincent, who becomes a little bit less of that defensive liability, inserting Tyler there, and having a lineup of like Hero, Butler, Martin, Bam, and then whatever type of forward too. I'm kind of blanking on some of the rest of the players. Having kind of Tyler Hero as that kind of a point guard mix, obviously with Jimmy. I think that's where there might be an advantage. Strus, having them a larger lineup, I think can help out them overall. Is what I'm thinking there. But yeah, to kind of combat that size issue that the Denver.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Hero because I was thinking about that too. I looked down just now and it said like he's targeting game 3 maybe. I think this is one of those situations to me where I'm wondering like, does it help them or does it hurt them to have Hero in? You know what I mean? Because Hero's the type of ball player that like almost commands, the rock. He almost commands those possessions. He really reminds me of like a Jason Terry type because it's like, he wants to put his hands on the ball and be that scorer. I'm just wondering for the Heat, is it better off for them to make maybe, automatically bring him off the bench? Like, do not even think about bringing him in the starting lineups. Don't interrupt what they have going on continuity wise, and just try to kind of like replace any lost backup minutes for shooting guard, point guard, whatever you want to do with him. Maybe if it's not a Highsmith or maybe less of Strus or something. I don't know what they want to do. Maybe it's a Lowry. I don't really know, but I'm kind of at that point where it's like the 2005 White Sox. I know we're going to be talking about baseball a little bit, but it's like would Frank Thomas have helped that team win a championship if he had just gotten healthy in the World Series? And it's like I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that could change the vibes, the chemistry, and to me, I mean, sticking with basketball. Hero is obviously a really nice player, really nice scorer. I just kind of worry, like, would he interrupt that flow? If they were to happen to go down 2 games, then maybe the Hero, injection is exactly what you need. So maybe it just depends on the situation of the series. But if it's knotted up at 1 or whatever else, like Miami 2-0 somehow, like, I don't know if you want to be bringing in heavy Hero minutes.
Yeah, I mean, Hero would play hero ball then, or be the hero there, that if that's the case. But yeah, obviously, also like Duncan Robinson, he's played really well. I guess, just that matchup with like, I feel like with Jamaal Murray against Kyle Lowry and then Gabe Vincent, I feel like that's just such a strong advantage, especially in the pick and roll situation. So, that's what I think. That's just one thing I would probably look for to see how much does Vincent and Lowry play, on I think just on the defensive side. But to your point though, they had a really good run at rotations that they had right now. So, maybe they just don't change it and they utilize their, I guess, speed overall on, transition and on the defensive side too. That zone actually has been pretty effective overall. So maybe they continue on a little bit on that front, and then we'll see what if Denver is able to kind of counter that.
Yeah. Gotta hope he's in good health as well, and then just able to kind of jump right back into the mix, and you're in the NBA Finals. It's a lot to ask of somebody who's been sidelined for as long as Hero has. So, in any case, I think we're kind of settled here as far as what we think will be the outcome here. I mean, I think we covered the teams pretty well. I did have some thoughts on new coaches around the NBA. I will ask for your opinion on Adrian Griffin taking over for the Milwaukee Bucks as their new head coach, and then Nick Nurse joining the Philadelphia 76ers as theirs. So, Wayne, you can start wherever you want, but what did you think of those hirings?
I liked Adrian Griffin. I kind of was eyeing him for the Chicago Bulls job actually, that Billy Donovan got. So, I think people forget, at least for me, like someone, I guess he kind of went the similar route as a Darvin Ham, right? I think they were both undrafted or maybe late round picks, if that. So definitely kind of came under the radar. But I believe like Adrian Griffin was like put up there with rookie of the year when he initially came out and was just a defensive force more so. I think he was kind of close to the top of the league in steals, I believe too. So just kind of an overall gritty player, which I feel like usually makes pretty good coaches overall. So like yeah, kind of fitting that Darvin Ham type of style. So if there was a player out or if there was a coach out there that doesn't have previous head coaching experience, I would definitely pick Adrian Griffin just because of his overall background. I think it was also with the Raptors, I believe, previously too, and that during that title run. So definitely has that history, and his son is playing in the league too. So obviously he's a pretty decent coach, or if he's able to have a son that, in my opinion, like I called him like as a possible top rookie, and I think he should kind of showcase that. So yeah, I'm all for Adrian Griffin. I think that's a good pick. But I certainly
Getting Nick Nurse in there.
for the 76ers, right? I think that's exactly the kind of coach they needed. Different in contrast of Doc Rivers, right? I think Doc Rivers was always known as that players coach, and I think I talked about that before. So I feel like him coming in, good motivator, but then really detail oriented, knows the X's and O's, knows how to get those favorable matchups. And with the roster that the 76ers have, I think that's definitely what they needed. Because I think if you ask a lot of the 76ers, I feel like I've watched some interviews that some of the players had. They didn't want to say like, our coaching isn't the greatest or something, but you could definitely sense a little bit of that. And with Nick Nurse, you're gonna get the opposite. You're gonna get a guy that knows, if he's able to replicate what he's was able to do in Toronto, is basically just maximize the talent, the situation that you have there, the player matchups, etc. Which I think in this day and age, especially, that's exactly what is necessary, and we see that with the Heat, what they were able to do, in terms of that, and then Ime Udoka, he did that last year, I think, with the Celtics, just making sure that you have those proper matchups and exploiting them. So Nick Nurse, I think, is a great hire for the 76ers there.
Yeah. To start with Griffin, I mean, he's had stints with, as a coach, at least Chicago, OKC, now, Toronto, obviously, and now moving into Milwaukee. But I mean, I feel like he's been a part of a lot of playoff, teams. He understands that context. He walks right into that same situation in Milwaukee. There were reports that he actually went to Giannis's house and just hung out with him. I don't know what happened there. They had to talk about him potentially coaching. And not too long after, he was named the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. So I think he built some rapport like straight off the bat with Giannis, and I think that's gonna mean a lot. I mean, you need to have the backing of your best player, obviously, and somebody who Giannis at least feels comfortable with. So I think I'll take all your points for what they are. I mean, his son, especially being in the pros too. I mean, he's obviously had some hands-on, ability to kind of extend his knowledge to his own blood. So in a lot of ways, get a fresh start, get a fresh look. It's not a coach that's been recycled, a bunch of different times and has had like moderate to good success. I mean, this is somebody who's kind of got a blank slate and an ability to, create a culture that fits, his own view and his own vision. And we'll see what that is. But Milwaukee's definitely not short on talent. So at the very least, I think we could probably expect a top 4 finish in Griffin's rookie season here to come. Nick Nurse, yeah, I mean, obviously great coach, got off to an amazing start with Toronto. Not really sure what happened, obviously, in this last year, the year before. I mean, losing some big stars. I mean, obviously losing a guy like Kawhi, Kyle Lowry's, definitely a hit to the locker room, the culture, everything that happens out on the floor, obviously. But no, I think in a lot of ways, Philly's been lacking, what you've been saying. They've been lacking like a true coach's coach and somebody who's going to do the X's and O's and push guys and maybe be confrontational. I don't think James Harden will fare very well in a Nick Nurse run unit organization. I think if Philly was smart, if I was the GM of Philly, if I could do some sort of sign-in trade to get James off the team, I mean, that's probably be where I don't think that's going to what he's ultimately looking for at this point of his career. I mean, Mike D'Antoni might have gotten that job, and they said that if that was the case, Joel Embiid would have asked. Nobody would have been surprised because that would have revealed the hand of Daryl Morey that essentially they're just trying to kind of butter up to James to keep him around. But at this point, I mean, I'm just not a James Harden guy. I don't think this guy is going to be one of the pieces that get them to a championship, get them over the hump. It's a cultural thing. It's a motivation thing. It's a grit. It's a hustle thing. It's everything that is not the Miami Heat. And I think Joel has that fire. I think he has that dog. I mean, I didn't like his comments in the offseason kind of blaming the rest of the team besides himself and James. It's like to have the BS exit game that they did and putting up, I think, a combined 24 points. It's like, you guys, are obviously all-world talents, but when it comes down to it, when you're faced with all the adversity in the world, I mean, this is what you really show us, and not just what you put on the court, but also how you voice yourselves in the press, like what kind of teammates you really are. So this is a wake-up call for Joel with the Sixers. I mean, if it doesn't work next year where they're at, the conference finals and they're like pushing on it, some hard decisions are going to have to get made because he's really, I think, going to wear out his welcome as somebody you envision as a championship leader in that sense. So hopefully Nick Nurse can do the job, but I don't think you could hand select a better option outside of Monty Williams to take over this squad.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, could you imagine? Because wasn't that a thing, right, with the 76ers a couple seasons back now, right, where they had the decision of either picking Tobias Harris or giving an extension to Jimmy Butler, right? Uh, could you imagine, what would happen if Jimmy Butler was with the team, with the 76ers, like along with Joel Embiid, right? I feel like that would have just settled things, but obviously they went in a different direction there. So, but to your point, yeah, Harden and Nurse, that'll be an interesting, especially Maury, like James Harden is his and everything. So, how would that all shake up? Because Harden's only going to get older. He's what 33, 34 now or something. Embiid's in his prime. Something's going to happen. They bring in
Another point in his prime, but
that's going to take some time to season a little bit. So a lot of question marks, I feel like, for the 76ers overall and kind of what they're going to be needing to do going forth here. But, at least from the X's and O's standpoint, the coaching standpoint, I think Nick Nurse definitely nails it on the head. It's just going to be a matter about the personnel, I think. Just trying to figure out what makes the most sense for him.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about other landing spots for James around the league. Like what would be good fits for him? I mean, I've heard the Phoenix talk. I'm trying to think what else. Like would a Dallas round? Like it's just hard. Like would the Portland Trailblazers take a swing to give Lillard another? I don't know. It's hard to say, but all I know is wherever James goes, wherever a guy like Kyrie goes, I just feel like it's all like sizzle, but like when you're really trying to compete, like there's no stake amongst those guys. And I'm just yeah, I think I'm at my point with those two, but I think yeah, Philly's setting themselves up the best way that they can. I'd love to see what they kind of remix it with for this upcoming season. I don't think you can just stand pat and expect everything to be fine. But I think they're talented enough to at least get in the conference finals, if not make a really true, push for the finals next season. If the chemistry is there, if it gels all together and all that. But
yeah.
So I guess that definitely is a step in the right direction. I did have another question for you if you have no more comments on Nurse.
Well, I was gonna say like, with the 76ers, or maybe they blow it up and say, hey,
Portland.
it's like, oh, sure, no, yeah, sales tax over there, right? For retail items. So, yeah, maybe he goes over there. Strong picks, maybe some talent that they got there. So that could definitely be something since apparently Lillard doesn't want to leave. So, and he's only getting older as well. But obviously a talent like Embiid, MVP, right? Like that's a ton. That's going to be quite a haul there, player in his prime, at the center position. But yeah, time's a ticking, I feel like, for the 76ers, whether they're going to see if they can either move Harden, pick some players that maybe suit Nick Nurse's style a little bit more, because it always seems like Harden, he kind of needs that ball to be the playmaker, right? So, which isn't Nick Nurse's style. I feel like his style is much more about, spreading the ball, sharing the ball, et cetera, et cetera. So that's definitely where I have, I guess, my doubts for him fitting into their system. But yeah, maybe Lillard and Embiid need to happen. I think that's where I'm getting at there. So yeah.
Yeah. What would that cost you? Like Brandon Miller, Anthony Simons, 3 firsts, 4 firsts, like something crazy. But no.
Honestly though, yeah. Like if you're the 76ers, right? Given everything now, it's like, I don't know, do you take it? But then at the same time, right? I feel like Nick Nurse is like, no, I wanted to get out of. I feel like there was a mutual agreement just to like part ways over at Toronto because it felt like they weren't going anywhere, and I feel like Nick Nurse, he's too good of a coach to be like with the team that's going to be kind of the middle of the pack, right? I feel like for the next couple of years, so
There's probably headed up, but
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm Philly for now, I'd probably pass. I would have to I'd probably have to make that kind of call at like the trade deadline next year if like the team's really not getting to where it needs to go. I'd probably maybe start pulling the trigger there. I'd maybe start with Harden and work on some other pieces there too. Maybe a Tobias buyout or like some sort of like just shake up, what Tobias Harris is for that club because it just feels like he's just a guy at this point. He's an overpaid guy and he just just I think they need to get tougher. I think they need to get quicker. I think they need to be, more defensive minded. And I just don't see him as being like the right fit and hasn't really been the right fit for a while. But anyways, the question I wanted to ask you was also a lot of rumblings about Joe Mazzulla and his job in Boston, how, he's performed without any sort of setup. I just want to know, like, what did you make of his first year? And, if you were the GM of the squad, what would you do with a guy like Mazzulla?
So it's interesting is that, and I think you might before with regards to the Celtics and kind of how they function, right? They were also down in the last series, I believe, too, right? Not just the Heat series. I think they were down 2-0, I believe. So against the 76ers. So
Yep.
right. So it's like,
Hmm.
do you back against the wall to, coach or be the person that isn't just reacting towards what their team's doing. You ought to be setting the tone, right? I think that was like a thing in ER, right, where Dr. Green was saying to his younger doctors or resident doctors, basically like you set the tone. Like you don't want to, if you have a person that with a bleeding heart or whatever, you're not going to be like, oh, kind of cry and just be all fearful. It's like no, you need to be the leader. You need to set the tone. And that definitely, whereas I feel like with Joe Mazzulla, he never set the tone. Where Udoka, that it seemed like he did, and it was a lot better at that. Hence why he was, the head coach there. So that's pretty much where I feel like I have doubts with Mazzulla being the tone setter, adapter. It felt like, and that's why his team kind of came back, from both series. So that's where for me, maybe he's much assistant coach for now, right? For now, I think he's like Jimmy Butler or like just as old as Jimmy Butler, which is pretty funny. So like he's a young coach and maybe needs more seasoning. But at the same time, like he got this head coaching position kind of, like it was kind of close to the season, and they're like, oh, let's get rid of Udoka because he had marital affairs against policy, things like that, right? So I'm not gonna be like give all responsibility on Mazzulla for everything. I think he maybe did the best he could. I feel like he's much more of an assistant coach still at this point in his career. They need that tone setter as the head coach because this team is way too talented to just or be behind, play from behind in both these series, right? Like, and then either of those squads that they faced against. So yeah, there really was no excuse, I believe, fall back behind against those teams there. So I'm kind of,
I'm gonna ask him right now,
but in my opinion, though, like he's still an assistant coach. He still has that assistant coach mindset where I make the adjustments, but I'm not the tone center, right? As a head coach should be.
Man, fair enough. I'll take your points. I don't know. This one rubbed me the wrong way just to think like, hey, you're gonna fire this guy. Like he comes into a season with all the turmoil that was kind of like set up, for the team. I mean, I feel like that probably had to be some sort of hit, to the locker room. What that probably did to guys like Tatum and Brown. I mean, what I heard was that Udoka is the kind of guy to really hold both those dudes accountable and like get in their face and not be afraid to say what needed to be said. And I think that when you just shake up the culture of a team like that, take a leader figure off the sidelines for those guys. I mean, somebody they probably entrusted and obviously went to war with. I mean, got to the finals, got really close. I mean, that had to be a huge morale knock for the team. And you're right, absolutely like loaded roster, really talented team. I think we should give the Sixers and Heat a lot of credit for what they did against the Celtics. But man, I just have a hard time like Mazzulla, in his first year to kind of enter into a situation like that, to keep the ship steady, to keep everything intact. Anything could have fell apart at that point. You don't really know what kind of shifts could take place, but we've seen, a team like the Brooklyn Nets with all the talent in the world just completely fall apart at every single seam with a guy like, Steve Nash and certain personalities that obviously like made that whole thing implode. But in a lot of ways, I just give him a lot of credit for taking his team to a Game 7 of Eastern Conference, Eastern Conference Finals in his first year. Come back from down 3-0. I mean, if he would have got swept, I think we have a different conversation just now. But it's like, man, I don't know. It just seems very harsh. Guys in his mid-30s. He's like technically our age and just kind of like leading the way. I'll take your points on him being like, this is rookie year. I feel like in a lot of ways, if we were to evaluate a rookie player the same way we evaluate a rookie coach, would we be as brutal against a guy like Ant Edwards if, he didn't win, the finals in his rookie year? It's hard to say. So, he was given a lot of talent. He was given a big responsibility. Whether he's up to the test, I'm not sure, but I'd love to give him a couple more years to really show us who he is. This game in all of sports, time ticks quickly, and pressure is mounting, and there's a lot of nerves and money on the line, things like that. So I get it. I think if you were to pull him from that role, obviously you'd probably have to can him. The only guy I could see at this point makes a lot of sense would be Monty Williams. It's again a guy I just keep recycling the name, just keep throwing it out there, but that dude did nothing to lose his, job in Phoenix. The players, from what I saw in the bubble, seriously, that guy was like crying in the locker room with those guys, and rallied them, to a lot of big victories in the bubble, and like that team was, completely forgotten at that point in time, and obviously built their way to being a finals team, almost winning it all. He's the only guy I think could look inside the souls of Tatum and Brown, like get them to play better together, get them to give, everything they have every moment of every game. It's just like, it's hard to say. Tatum doesn't get injured. Game 7 might be a different story. We don't know. But a lot of the continuity issues, I think, with those two have been, more and more ever present in conversations now. And I still think you keep the band together, but that's just my thought. I would keep Mazzulla for at least, next season, see how it rolls. And keep the team together. Maybe add some different rotation pieces, but I wouldn't be doing a whole lot to completely blow that thing up.
Yeah. If you're a Celtics fan, would you want if there were to be a change, right? If there were to be a change, would you want Mazzulla at the head coaching position and kind of to what you were saying, like kind of keep that continuity, or would you want someone like an internal hire, right, with previous head coaching experience for the Celtics? Would you want Bradley Stevens coming back, setting the tone, and then maybe Mazzulla is like, you know what, he's the president, he was a head coach before, maybe let him take the reins. I get to keep like an assistant head coaching position or something like that, right? Kind of, maybe take a pay cut and kind of a downgraded position there, but it's a word from Bradley Stevens directly more so of I get less of this pressure. He's not the best press conference person. His sideline reporting interactions like mix the Greg Popovich model, right? But he doesn't have the same mystique that Greg Popovich has. So less of that.
They get Bradley Stevens to kind of come back,
taking the reins, kind of be that kind of what Pat Riley did, right? Where he was the former head coach, was the president of the Miami Heat, I believe, too. And I was like, you know what? I think I need to take the reins here and kind of lead them forth because I don't believe there's anybody that can be a better head coach than me right now. So maybe Bradley Stevens. Would you do that, or would you kind of stick where the current status quo?
I think you bringing up Stevens is a great point and overlooked for sure. I wasn't even thinking about that. I think if you were to roll into the year with Mazzulla and you get to the All-Star break or something and you're fluttering at like a few games over 500 or something, maybe you make that decision, just fire him there and have Stevens come right down in there and figure things out like a Pat Riley. I mean, I think he needs to work on his hair, slick it back, add some extra snake oil if he's really going to make that move. But just to remind myself, did Riley do that to Van Gundy or Spo? I can't remember.
I think he did that to Van Gundy, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that might have been like when they got Shaq, or I know Dwayne Wade was involved in there. So yeah,
Yes, because I think Van Gundy was leading the squad, and then the second they got Shaq, or then like something wasn't going on with Shaq and SVG, and it was like, all right, you're out of here. Like Riley's back in. So no, I think that's a great point, and obviously he knows that team better than anyone else. So if it is your responsibility, I mean, sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and get on in there. And there's not too many examples of this. I think the Florida Marlins actually did that at one point too, where the GM, who had absolutely no managerial experience, decided to do that for himself. And I'm missing the name too. I think he failed miserably, but it's just not often times where you see somebody get back into onto the bench. And Stevens is obviously an amazing head coach, so I think that would be an incredible fit. So we'll just have to see. I just would just love to see this guy be able to give this one more shot and to prove everybody somewhat wrong, even if Celtics ultimately don't get over the hump and win an NBA title.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. It'd be nice. Yeah, give him the shot. It seems like a good dude and everything, and just don't fall so behind in the series. I think get your players ready, like mentally, physically, whatever, the X's and O's too, right? So yeah,
fair enough. Well, let's wrap it up here for basketball, and we'll close out the show with a final thought. Wayne, do you want to give it a go?
Sure. My final thought. We are approaching the end of the AAPI month, so shout out to all the Asian representation out there, from restaurants to business people, directors. We've finally made it in Hollywood and all that, so I think definitely go check out nice new family-owned Asian restaurant for sure out there. But then also keep a lookout on all the movies and things that are happening out there, because I think definitely in this day and age, representation certainly matters, especially for me. So go check out whatever you can out there, and support small local family-owned businesses, and then watch some good shows too, because there's a lot of them out there. So
for sure. I mean, I will always roll up my sleeves and dig into some Thai, Korean, Chinese, Japanese Thai cuisines. Others out there have had some Laotian and some Malaysian recently, so I'll keep up my support of any sort of local restaurants around DC and the Virginia area. As for media, Korea is definitely taking it home in terms of putting together some great series. Also just some awesome movies, I feel like, in the last couple of years altogether. So I'm I'll always be a partner in all this, and an ally and all else. So and watch the Ball and Breakfast podcast, because we have some AAPI rep on the show as well. So shout out Wayne for this month.
Yeah. How many sports Asian personalities are there? Got Mina, Paulo, right? Like, there's always so many of us. So yeah,
no doubt. Man, for my final thought, it's been a few weeks, but I've had some awesome meals at a couple different restaurants. Siren out in Charlottesville is run by Laura Fauner. She's a Food Channel celebrity chef. She's from Charlottesville, but found her way into a bunch of Guy Fieri shows, and Triple G, Guy's Grocery Games being one of them. But in any case, we looked up her restaurant after we've obviously perused around on the Food Channel from time again, but had a chance to go to a restaurant, and very reasonable menu. I mean, in terms of pricing and offerings and things like that. And we're the type, my wife and I, just kind of like sit back and order a ton of food, and people kind of laugh at the amount of food we end up buying and how many dishes we ended up going with. But there's always room for leftovers in the fridge if you can't finish everything. So just a beginner's tip for anybody who's going to a nice restaurant, like, get a bunch of stuff and try things out, and get some doggy bags and bring it home and have lunch and dinner the next day if you can't finish it all. So she has a menu that just fuses together so many different cultures and flavors and stuff, but really enjoyable food. My wife got a seafood chowder to start with. I had some pita. It was like warm pita bread with feta spread and then some mint. So you just like kind of roll everything over, and the pita's like nice and warm. Really good tasting stuff. I had the best, follow up starter after that, but it was essentially like tuna tartare, diced up really thinly over a bed of avocado, and then this like chipotle aioli with some house made like warm tortilla chips. And I'm telling you, man, I just like dug through the tartare, through the avocado into the chipotle aioli, and then like seriously ate that whole thing by myself and like could do that like again and again. It was just like the best starter I think I've had in at least the last couple of years. And rounded out my meal with a pork belly and crab dish at the end. It was just like super smoky, pretty spicy, but you just had the lump crab in there. It was really good. And pasta, you just can't really go wrong in that sense. And I think over the last couple of weeks we were in DC and had a chance to try out an Italian restaurant. Man, this is killing me now because the name is going over my head a bit. But in general, just had some really good like cheese garlic bread. They had like a cheese bechamel that they brought out, so you could just like dip this garlic bread that already had cheese melted on it into the bechamel. Outside of that, I feel like I had a fettuccine alfredo with chicken, but just like hand like made noodles and things like that. It's not like the big pasta noodles you'll get, but just like these really like curly, like almost like farfalle, to be honest with you. And just everything was like real top of the line. Had a couple of glasses of red wines, Cabernet Sauvignon. Both meals were incredibly different. One was more like the fusion style. The other was more like your rustic Italian and just like real hearty, elevated dishes. But I don't know. Overall, like, does any of that sound good to you? Have you had like a good meal in the last couple of weeks, Wayne, to share? I'm stumbling on what I should ask you in response here.
I mean, all that sounds amazing, not gonna lie. Like, what, pork belly and we say crab, like all in the same kind of concoction there? Like, that sounds amazing. Like, you bring up all the fatty flavors of the pork belly, and then crab itself is like, its own like fat crustacean basically too. So, why not have a little bit of that? I guess in terms of, meal. I've been kind of in a Greek fixation. So I've always been a big fan of hummus. I like anything. I like my hummus a little bit spicy, which is something. So I actually had dinner with a friend, and we were at a Greek restaurant, and then I think she asked for like Tabasco or something like that, and I had to tell her like Greek restaurants really don't spicy, but with this hummus, like obviously it's like a
Western
hummus
hummus.
type of thing, right? But I feel like just having that, hummus with like a pita bread or even some crackers or something like that, right? Like that is such a delicious thing that sure it's like it's somewhat healthy, right? It's hummus, right? So it's cool. But yeah, having a nice pita bread I think goes a long way. Kebabs, I've had some kebabs in the past, this past week too. So having like a nice like Mediterranean type of grilled kebab, I think is it's lean if you get those like lamb kebabs and stuff, and then some like peppers on there, kind of like sautéed or has like a smoky, char. I think all that sounds amazing to me. So I definitely am, much more in favor. I think Greek, Mediterranean type of cuisines of late. It is the summer. I can only maintain a bikini body for so long. So I feel like having those good meals, Mediterranean Greek meals, definitely are helpful for this time of year. Along with having like hummus and stuff like that too. So.
That all sounds good. Just wanted to say the plug for the Italian restaurant is Caruso's Grocery in DC, and I normally look at the Washingtonian restaurants, and I think it fell within the top 25. So I continue to kind of work my way down that list. Some of them are Michelin star, others are holes in the wall. Doesn't matter. They just put the best 100 they have together year in, year out. And I recommend that if you're in the DC area. But I'm with you as far as like good hummus goes, whether it's Middle Eastern, Greek. I feel like if you can get a good hummus somewhere, like the homemade type, it's got like, the tahini and chickpeas kind of like mashed together. You got like a little bit of that oil just kind of laying on top. It's like served kind of warm with pita. Whether it's like an Egyptian style Persian restaurant, I just feel like in Chicago especially, like you can find even those holes in the wall that I like will do, hummus really well, do like shawarma. I love kebab. Any of that kind of stuff is always good to me. I mean, a gyros is like obviously very simple, but still like super filling. I actually had souvlaki the other night, so I will not shy away from Middle Eastern food. It always eats very clean, and you feel like not stuffed or engorged after having it. And you can eat like a lot of food, but just have some peppers and onions, kind of break things up. And obviously the hummus is always pretty good for you as well. I just feel like it's a good way to get your protein, but eat a little bit leaner.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, you gotta get your protein. Like Titan Nutrition or whatever, always out there. But hey, if you do want some Titan Nutrition, you can get 10% list of free shipping. Link in the description there. So having that little plug in there.
Yeah, shout out Titan Nutrition. Glad to plug you guys. Appreciate the backing here on the Ball and Breakfast podcast. If you are working out or getting in any sort of protein, extra carbs, go grab some Titan Nutrition. Obviously, links in the description as Wayne mentioned. But if anything, if you like this show tonight, give us a like, a subscribe on YouTube. We're on Instagram. You can follow all our stories, reels, posts. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google as well. So wherever you are, feel free to subscribe, review us, and send us some sort of message. We love to connect. We did a show before tonight's live stream here with Jaden's Fifth Down podcast. So check out Jaden's Fifth Down podcast as well on YouTube. He's also on Instagram, but you can catch us there doing a feature. And if you ever want to collaborate, just let us know. We're always open to making new friends and our sports, food, and culture love throughout the universe here. So get in touch, and thanks from the Ball and Breakfast podcast.